Okay, welcome back and good evening. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm not sure where everyone is today, but I think some more people will be joining in a few minutes. So we have a few more meetings. So this will be, I guess, meetings 8, and so we're going to cover chapter 10 today, and some more stuff on oligopoly and some game theory material, which I think will be kind of interesting. So chapter 10 today on game theory, and then a few more things on advertising as well. And just a reminder that chapter 9 homework is due today. So make sure you get that posted on the discussions area. Okay. All right. So if you go to the chapter 10 section, you'll see I have a bunch of stuff here. Some stuff is for next week. And so all the chapter 10 stuff here, we're going to go through that. The chapter 10 Word document, the Excel document, and the homework. Um, this stuff, the oligopoly homework, we'll get to that next week, so don't worry about that right now. That's for next week. Okay, so there's a kind of a bigger homework assignment coming. Kind of not bigger, but just bigger than a normal one. It's kind of like the elasticity one we did from chapter 3, and so we'll cover that next week. And then maybe some of you took a listen to these podcasts I suggested, and so there was a couple of them on advertising. And so I just wanted to talk about those for a minute before we get into the material, because that kind of leads us into what we're talking about today and a little bit of what we talked about before. All right, so there was I thought, some pretty interesting podcasts and somewhat relevant on advertising, and they're mostly about TV and digital, although they mentioned some other things. And so let's just kind of go through a few of those main topics, and then we'll jump into something that leads into game theory, which is the advertising of oligopolies. Okay, so let me just make kind of a few notes, and we'll talk about the main points of the podcast, and then won't spend too much time on this, but it's something a little less technical, and I thought it was interesting. So there was there's basically a bunch of different types of advertising. The main ones they talked about were TV and digital. Okay, and I can probably think of quite a few more, and let's just think if we can exhaust these. So TV's been the main big one for a while. Before TV, there was a lot of newspaper advertising, although that's probably less used and less effective, as they mentioned in the podcast. Okay, and digital kind of needs to be broken down. I guess we could probably put magazine as well. I mean, that didn't really come up too much in the podcast, but so there's like the non TV digital ones, the paper based are just the physical location ones. Okay, and now we're getting into digital, which is pretty much most of the advertising now, right? So digital consists of a bunch of things. Okay, and then I think one of the, I mean, not newer, but one of the maybe more used now, and especially gaining popularity, is the advertising that kind of just infiltrates your social media space. So it'll kind of like just be part of your Facebook or your Instagram. Okay, and so yeah, I think those are the main ones. And anything else I'm missing in terms of just forms of advertising? I gotta, okay. Okay, so again, the main ones were TV and digital, but the digital ones can be broken down into different components: internet searches, podcasts, social media, which they talked about in those last podcasts. Um, and so I think these are the main ones, unless you can think of anything else. And what they kind of talked about mostly were these two types. And it seemed like what they found, especially with TV, is that there was not much, if any, a marginal effect of advertising. So the research and the academic research didn't show much of an effect of advertising dollars leading to more revenue, right, or leading to more sales. Okay, and again, it's hard to prove that, and you get a lot of pushback from the companies that are spending billions on advertising, but that's what some of the academic research suggested that they presented in the podcast. And these ones it looked like were a little more effective, but it depended specifically how the advertising was done. Like if you recall, if you listen to the podcast, they talked about, okay, they talked about like keywords versus advertising for the company. So like if you basically if you were searching for like eBay and eBay advertised while during the search, that wasn't really effective, which makes sense because um, if you're searching for it, you're probably going to go there. But what was effective, it seemed like at least a little more effective, was that if you're searching for like shoes or cars or something like that, and the advertisers see the keyword, they can bid to have their specific company show up for the keywords. So it seemed like keyword advertising uh, in like search engines was somewhat more effective. Okay, and then we'll talk about some of the reasons why companies still advertise a little bit, which will lead us into today's material. And then we'll even talk about the advertising elasticity, which we presented or talked about in chapter 3, which I think they mentioned in a couple of these podcasts. So it seems to me that the digital ones would be a little more effective, and I think, or I guess one more thing I didn't mention is radio. So I think this one is becoming less and less effective, and that's number one. I think a lot of the problem is because of DVRs and stuff like that. You can skip the commercials. So if you're watching something on DVR. Assuming it's not a live event, you can skip this, or even if it's a live event, you can get up and turn the sound off, or go to the bathroom during the advertising. Now, if you're driving your car, you're more likely to listen to the radio advertising, right? You're not going to turn it off. So I think that's still somewhat effective. And I think these ones, especially from the importance of or the growing use of podcasts or listening to podcasts, they it's really hard to like if you're going for a run or driving your car or walking your dog or whatever or going for a hike. If you're listening to a podcast like it's in your pocket, you're probably not going to. I'm not even sure if you can. You're probably not going to skip the ads, so you're probably going to listen to them. And a lot of times they'll even have like the man or the woman or the host of the podcast themselves read the ad, which I think is somewhat effective because they can kind of, if you're already interested in like the person who's doing the podcast and they're personally being paid to, but they're personally promoting the product and talking about it, I think that's a little bit more effective than being forced to watch something out of nowhere, like in TV or newspapers. And these ones, I mean, personally, I think they're getting less effective just because they're not really. You don't have to look at them, and they're kind of out of nowhere. So I think the most effective ones still are radio and podcast, and probably these ones as well, because it's almost like they're like the best way I can describe it is it's just like if you look through like your Instagram feed, the advertisement is basically one of the Instagram posts, right? That's how they do it. And so it's almost like it seems like a post, but it's an ad. And so because it's so seamlessly like introduced or integrated into Instagram or whatever, that I think it becomes a little more effective. So I think when it becomes something you're not likely to skip or something you're not likely just to zone out of, it becomes more effective. But again, it seemed like a lot of the advertising dollars it was hard to make to find hard evidence of any of them working. And that brings us to why do they do it? Okay, and so remember um, when they were talking about this one, if you listen to the podcast, one of the one of the girls who was being interviewed that did research on this mentioned the advertising elasticity, which we talked about, I think, in chapter 3, and it was part of your big assignment. Okay, and I pulled up. Yeah, so remember this, the advertising elasticity from chapter 3, which was also in some of the homework assignments. This showed basically, and if you heard her talk about this, you probably were familiar with what we talked about in class. The advertising elasticity, which is the percent change in sales, or the percent change in demand due to a percent change in advertising. So, like for example, if you increase advertising by a certain percent, what's the resulting change in your sales? And the way they did it was like if you double your advertising budget, uh, maybe your sales go up by 25% or so on. But it seemed like when the academic research looked at this more specifically, there was a very small or minimal effect. Okay, and so then that leads us to the question, which we're going to talk about more today in game theory, is if there's strong evidence saying that advertising isn't effective, or at least you're not. I mean, it's not a zero sum game. Like you're still getting something, but it doesn't seem like the money that goes in translates into enough what should be come out from advertising. So why are there so much why are there billions and billions of dollars spent on advertising? Okay, and so some of the reasons were, I mean, they brought up a few things, and one of the things was basically like that even if this research is correct, and even if it looks like it's not effective, the companies aren't going to believe it because there's so many jobs created and there's so many. It's been such a way of business for so long that they don't, even if the evidence were true, which we're not sure if it is, they don't want to accept it because it's already, I mean, it's a job, and if you say advertising doesn't work, then all the billions of dollars in jobs that created through advertising would be eliminated, and that's not what a lot of companies want. Okay, and basically, another main reason was that basically everyone else does it. So if all these companies spent billions on advertising and it didn't work, then they wouldn't do it. So just the fact that they spend all this money and they have been for years means it probably works. All right, so that's another argument. Okay, and then there's a few more points, but the thing that I think one of the main reasons um, why companies advertise is because their competitors do. And so you'll see a lot of advertising in oligopolies and monopolistic competition. So I think this is going to lead us into today's topic, which is game theory, which shows that the reason a lot of companies advertise is because they want to keep in competition with their rivals. Okay, and so I can list many more examples, but I think a lot of the reason why companies continue to do I mean, which method they choose to do it, whether it be radio, TV, podcasts, is another question. But I think even if Coke or Pepsi or whatever, or vice versa, thinks that it's not effective, there's a big argument to say that um, that's because the advertising budgets cancel each other out. So it might be true that advertising isn't very effective, but that's holding everything else constant. So that could be because these advertising plans or campaigns are canceling each other out. So if Coke stopped advertising, it's possible that Pepsi would get more sales if they continue to advertise. So that's what the firms are afraid of. Even if it shows the research shows that their dollars, that it doesn't change their sales much, that doesn't mean that if they stop and their rival keeps advertising, that they won't get more of the market. So I think that's a big reason, and this is going to lead us into a lot of today's material, which is you have to worry about what your rival does, and that's going to be game theory. Okay, and then yeah, so I think that was the gist of there was some other interesting stuff in the podcast, um, but I think those are the main things. And I think it leads us in nicely to this because number one, it's hard to prove if advertising is effective, and number two, even if it wasn't, it's hard to say that if you stopped advertising, your rival wouldn't continue. And so I think a lot of, I mean, I think a lot of big companies want to keep advertising because their competitors do, and they're afraid if they stop advertising, they'll lose out to the company that keeps advertising. And now you can kind of see that maybe if Coke and Pepsi uh, could make an agreement to both not advertise, that they wouldn't have to spend as much to kind of beat each other out. But I think that's hard to do. But there is some incentive we'll see in game theory for cutting the budget back if you can make some agreement with your competitors. Okay. So anyway, I thought those couple podcasts were somewhat interesting and relevant, and I think this is some of the key points from there. Uh, any any other questions or comments about those podcasts? If you listened to them, did I miss anything, or Uh, did you did you find it interesting or anything else um, on advertising before we start the game theory from chapter 10? Okay. Um, okay, so you can open up. So now that we talked about kind of how advertising plays into this topic amongst firms, we can talk about some game theory and some advertising games. We'll get to that. And so you can open up the chapter 10 PowerPoint here under PowerPoint. Okay, so chapter 10, game theory inside oligopoly, and a little bit there's some game theory aspects as well for monopolistic competition. Okay, so there's a video there you can take a look at if you get a chance. So we're going to kind of cover the basics and some games, how they fit into oligopolies and monopolistic competition. And so just to cover a few of the basics, you might have learned some of this stuff in Biz 500B if you've ever talked about game theory before. But I'll just kind of start from the beginning and kind of build the main points of game theory as it relates to oligopolies. So number one is you can just define a dominant strategy as a strategy that results in the highest payoff to a player regardless of the opponent's action. So if we have two firms or two oligopolies and they would choose the same action no matter what their rival chooses, that would be a dominant strategy. If their action depends on what the rival chooses, then they don't have a dominant strategy. So if they choose the same thing every time, it's a dominant strategy. If they don't, it's not dominant. Okay, so let's illustrate this example in demonstration problem 10.1. And so I have the demonstration problem solved under chapter 10. So if you go to chapter 10 and you open up the chapter 10 um, Word document here. Okay, so here's the first one. All right, so we have just a simple game here, and so I'll kind of explain the aspect of we're going to have two players at two firms, and there'll be a little payoff matrix like this, and this will show kind of what each player gets given the strategies of the other. So player A in blue can go up or down, and player B in purple can go left or right. And then these are the payoff outcomes. Uh, the first number goes to player A on the left, and the second number goes to player B on the right. So 10, 15, 10, and -10 go to player A, and basically like the other ones go to player B. And like if player A goes up and player B goes left, the outcomes are player A gets 10 and player B gets 20. Okay, if player A goes up and player B goes right, the outcomes are player A gets 15 and player B gets 8. So that's how you read this picture here. Okay, and the goal here, or just what we want to determine, is does player B have a dominant strategy? So would player B choose the same thing every time, regardless of what player A would choose? So let's look at it through the eyes of player B. So if player B is going to respond to player. So if player A goes up, player B can go left and get 20, or right and get 8. So player B would go left and get 20. So the outcome they would choose, I underlined. And then if player A goes down, then player B can go left and get 7, or player B can go right and get 10. Okay, so you can see that player B's choice depends specifically on what player A chooses to respond to. And so player B does not have a dominant strategy because sometimes they would go left and sometimes they would go right. Now let me just do player A's because I think player A does have a dominant strategy, or I know it does because I've solved this. But look at what player A would do. So if player B goes left, player A can go up and get 10, or down and get minus 10. So player A would go up. If player B goes right, player A can go up and get 15, or player A can go down and get 10. So see, doesn't matter what player B chooses, player A is always going to choose up because up always gives player A the highest outcome. So if you can see clearly, the idea is that player A does have a dominant strategy of up because they're always going to go up, but player B doesn't have a dominant strategy because sometimes they would choose left and sometimes they would choose right. Okay, so that kind of illustrates what a dominant strategy looks like. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So let's define something. If you've heard of this before, it's called a Nash equilibrium after mathematician John Nash, or mathematician economist John Nash. And so this is a condition describing a set of strategies which no player can improve or pay off by unilaterally changing her strategy given the other player's strategies. So this basically means that uh, it's an outcome in which both players can't improve upon the situation. So no one would want, neither player or firm would want to change from the outcome they're at. So it's the best case for both players. Okay, to illustrate that, let's look at this demonstration problem. Okay, so in the game presented, the one we just looked at, table 10.1, let's define the Nash equilibrium. So we'll define it in terms of list the strategies, then list the outcome. Okay, so same thing, and we kind of went through it. And the way you solve it, um, well, basically, if you did it like if you went through the actions like I did, and you either underlined or circled the outcomes they would choose, then the Nash equilibrium is basically going to be the only spot, if there is one, where both outcomes are underlined or circled. See how it's this one? And that reason is because all the other options, at least one of the players wouldn't choose that. Okay, so look at this one. Okay, so that's what player A would choose, but player B would not choose that. Okay, so player B is never going to choose that. This one, player B would choose it, but player A would not choose it. So player A is never going to choose this one. And this one, no one's going to choose that, so that's out. So the only place where if player A goes up, player B goes left, and if player B goes left, player A goes up, is here. So this is the only place, or the only outcome, or the only cell in which both players is doing their best, the best they can. So if we get here, player B wouldn't want to change this position, and player A wouldn't want to change this position either. So if they're both going to stick with what they got here, this is the best outcome given the other player's action, then that's exactly how we define the Nash equilibrium. Okay, and you can define it by the strategies. So player A chose up, and player B chose left, and the outcomes are 10 and 20. So strategies, and then outcomes. Okay, so do we see what I'm showing you here? So first for the dominant strategy, and then how to illustrate the Nash equilibrium. Okay, everyone sees the the analysis here. Okay, so here we go. Here's our first advertising game based on this concept of game theory. And so we'll start with simple ideas or simple like one-time things. We'll get more advanced. We'll look at repeated games. We'll look at discounting, and then eventually we'll look at multi-stage games. Okay, all in the context of oligopolies and some in the context of monopolistic competition. But let's look at this one first. So demonstration problem 10.4. Okay, so here's the question from your textbook. Suppose your firm competes against another firm for its customers, and you and your rival know your products will be obsolete at the end of the year and must simultaneously decide whether or not to advertise. Okay? So in your industry, advertising does not increase total industry demand, but instead induces customers to switch among the products of different firms. So this statement here is what firms are worried about if they want to think about cutting back advertising, because even if they don't think they're pulling more customers off the street, they think they're getting customers away from their rivals, and that's worth it for them just to advertise. Okay, so if both you and your rival advertise, the two advertising campaigns will simply offset, and you each earn 4 million in profits. If neither of you advertise, you'll earn 10 million in profits. However, if one of you advertises and the other doesn't, the firm that advertises will earn 20, and the firm that doesn't advertise will earn 1 million. So is your profit maximizing choice to advertise or not to advertise, and how much money do you expect to earn? Okay, so this is a simple model, but this shows a lot of the arguments behind why firms advertising, because they're afraid of the other firm advertising if they don't advertise. So let's just solve it based on what each firm would do, right? So if firm B advertises, firm A can advertise and get 4, or not advertise and get 1. They're going to advertise and get 4. If firm B doesn't advertise, firm A can advertise and get 20, or not advertise and get 20. So it doesn't matter what firm B does. Firm A is always going to choose advertise. Okay? Now, you can probably see that it's kind of symmetrical, the payouts here. So firm B is going to do the same thing, but let's go through the analysis just to confirm. If firm A advertises, firm B can advertise and get 4, or don't advertise and get 1. Firm B is going to advertise. And if firm A doesn't advertise, firm B can advertise and get 20, or don't advertise and get 10. All right, and so look at the outcomes. Here, firm A wouldn't choose that. No one would choose that. Firm B would not choose that. But here, they would both choose that. So if they get to this point, advertise, without some more information, neither one of them is going to change their position. So that is the Nash equilibrium, right? So we can define that as advertise, 4 million, 4 million. So these are the strategies, and these are the payouts. So your profit maximizing choice is to advertise, and you expect to earn 4 million in profit. So this, although this is just a simple little example, this can give a lot of, like I said, a lot of proof or support to why firms advertise. So if they believe something like this is true, right? Even if you say that advertising doesn't affect anything, okay, which is possible, that doesn't mean it doesn't affect things if you stop advertising and your rival still advertises. So look at clearly it's better if they both don't advertise. Hold on a second. Okay, in terms of this game, clearly it's better if they don't advertise, if they can make an agreement and both save the advertising budget and each get the 10 million, the extra 6 million per firm. But the fear is that if they do that and one of the firms decides to break the agreement or advertise, or they can lose a bunch. So a lot of reasons firms advertise is because number one, they want to keep competitive with the rival. Number two, they don't trust the rival and they're afraid if they stop their advertising, the continued advertising of the other firm will take away customers from their their business. So this is a very good simple illustration of why firms might keep advertising even if research says it doesn't work. Okay, so now we're going to look at a game which is played more than once. All right, so everybody following along with the concept so far? All right. So now let's look at a game in which we play it more than once, and there's a couple different or types we can look at this. So first, let's look at a situation in which the firm plays the game multiple times and they keep playing. So this is like firms don't know uh, when their business is going to stop or their game's going to stop, so they keep playing the game or they keep advertising whatever over and over. So let's look at basically this kind of thing. Okay, but you play it once, you play it again, you keep playing it, so it's played multiple times. All right, which is more likely what happens. So it's not like firms just advertise once and they're done. They advertise today, they advertise tomorrow, they advertise in a month or whatever. They keep advertising, or they keep doing whatever the game tells them. Okay, so in this sense, let's define an infinitely repeated game as a game that's played infinite number of times, so it keeps going. So a game that's played over and over again forever, and in which players receive payouts during each play of the game. So what we need to do here is look at what the firm is going to get if it basically does their Nash equilibrium. Their just so if they do their Nash equilibrium response every time, what can they get? Or if they can make an agreement and get a higher payout by agreeing with the firm, will they do that? Or what if they make an agreement and they break the agreement? So there's three things to look at. So um, what would they get if they cooperate? What would they get if they reach an agreement? And then what would they get if they cheat on the agreement? Will it bring them back to the the one-time game thing? So let me show you the example here. Okay, so basically the remember our present value analysis from like chapter one um, would say that the present value of to a firm is the discounted stream of all the benefits. So remember like the example is you discount period one, you discount more period two, and so on. But this time we're playing the game over and over, and there is no limit on periods or years. So if you can say this game is played over and over with the same interest rate and the same payment, this formula here you can use this as a summary of what your present value is worth if the game goes on forever. So instead of summing up all the payments forever, just use this formula, and this is the best guess you can get as to what the present value is to the firm, and that's only if the interest rate is constant and only if the payment is constant. Okay, so we'll use this firm to calculate uh, what the present value to the firm is if they keep an agreement and keep it forever. Okay, and so this basically says the present value is 1 plus the interest rate divided by the interest rate times whatever the payout is every period. Okay, so demonstration problem 10.6, let's suppose firm A and firm B repeatedly face the situation presented in table 10.7 on page 364, and the interest rate is 40%. Okay, so very high interest rate. Uh, the firms agree to charge a high price each period, provided neither firm has cheated on this agreement in the past. And so look at the little payout here. So before we do the analysis, okay, see here's so basically like if you went through the analysis, like what what would firm A do if firm B went low? Firm A could go high and get negative 40, or low and get 0. So it'd get low. And if firm B goes high, firm A could go high and get 10, or low and get high, which is 50. So you can see that if you do the analysis, both firms are going, if there's no agreement, and we just look for the Nash equilibrium, they're both going to go low, all right? And that would be the outcome if we play the game once, just the Nash equilibrium. But you can see, uh, and so this is a price. So first of all, this is firm A pricing their product higher or pricing it lower, and this is firm B doing the same thing. So the reason why they can see if they both price low, they both get the same amount of revenue, which is basically 0. But if one firm prices high and one firm prices low, the firm goes to the lower price competitor, right? If it's a similar product, they'd rather have the cheaper one, and the firm that prices low gets all the business, and the firm that prices high loses. But you can see the other option is if they could both agree to price high, the customers have no choice but to go to one of the firms, and they both make more profits if they both agree to price high and don't undercut each other. So we got a bunch of scenarios. Don't make a deal and both price low. Make a deal and both price high to get more revenue because the customers have no choice but to pay the higher price, or you get some uh, broken agreement scenario or some cheating scenario where one firm prices low and undercuts the other firm. Okay? So, question 1. What are firm A's profits if it cheats on the collusive agreement? So the agreement is, all right, if we're going to play this game forever, can we agree to both price it high, and instead of getting 0 every time, we both get 10 every time forever? So that seems like a good deal, but is there an incentive for you to cheat on it and get the higher payout of 50 now, and then go back to the non-agreement in the future? Okay, so what are firm A's profits if it cheats on the agreement? So the agreement is both price high, and if firm A cheats, that means they cheat and price low, and they get the 50 now, and firm gets the negative 40. Firm B gets the negative 40. So basically what's going to happen, see, you can see how this is going to work, where if you break the agreement, you get the 50 at the one-time thing, but then the agreement's over and you go back to this Nash equilibrium, and they're both, right? So if you both agree to price high and you cheat, firm B is not going to continue to make that agreement with you because you broke firm B's trust, and they're going to price it low again. So if you cheat once, you get the 50, but then it goes back to this. Okay, so cheating, you get a one-time payment of 50, and then the rest of the game that goes on forever, you get a bunch of zeros. Okay, so see that? So firm A, if it cheats, it gets the 50, and then just a bunch of zeros, so 50 plus a bunch of zeros is 50. Now, what are firm A's profits if it does not cheat on the agreement? So basically, if it agrees to price at 10 every time and the game is played over and over. So again, remember, you can use this simple formula to see what the discounted future value or present value of the payments are if you get 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, all right? So it depends on the interest rate. So basically, take this formula, 1 plus I divided by I times the payment, and 1 plus I is, so 1 is 1 is 1, and then I is 40%, so 40% is 0.4, so 1 plus 0.4 is 1.4, and divided by the interest rate of 40, which is 0.4. And then multiply that by your payment you get every time of 10. So if you take this, plug in the interest rate and the payment of 10, all right, this is 0.4, this is 0.4, this is 10, you get this. And if you do the math, that comes out to 3.5 times 10, which is essentially a present value of 35. So what you can see is the outcome, which depends very much on the interest rate, is that with an interest rate of 40%, it's worth it to cheat now and get the 50 than to keep the agreement, because the discounted value, the discounted present value is only 35. So because this is bigger than this, both firms have an incentive to cheat, and they're both going to cheat, and we're going to get to this outcome. So basically, since 50 is bigger than 35, the present value of firm A's profits is higher if A cheats on the agreement than if it does not cheat. So since the payoff matrix is symmetric, right, they both get the same payouts given their options. Each firm has an incentive to cheat, and if it believes the other firm will not cheat, even if it doesn't. So in equilibrium, each firm is going to do their projections and see that the present value of cheating is higher than the present value of making the agreement, and they're both going to cheat, which means they're both going to price low. And we're left to just the basic Nash equilibrium scenarios. And the reason why this occurs here is because the interest rate is so high that taking the 50 now and investing it at 40% is better than taking 10 every time, because that interest rate is so high. And anytime you wait longer for something you can earn 40% return on, you're losing out. And so that's why it's worth it to take it now with a 40% return in whatever bank account this is, or investment this is, and break the agreement. So this basically, for this type of example, compare the cheating with the cooperation, but make sure you see that the interest rate makes a huge difference. If we were to lower the interest rate to a certain point, it'll probably be worth it to cooperate. Okay. All right. So questions on what we did here with doing the present value analysis of a infinitely repeated game here? All right. So next type of game. Okay, so that was a game when two firms played over and over forever. Now let's look at a scenario where two firms play a game multiple times, but the game's going to end, and there's a probability associated with it ending. So these are games that are they're repeated, but for a finite number of times, and there's an uncertain final period. So basically, there's a probability associated with the game ending any given time. So now let's look at a scenario where the game is going to end. You don't know exactly when it's going to end, but you have a probability of when it will end. All right, so here we go. And let me just show you that I did all these the charts of the payoff matrices in Excel, and so you're welcome to use I posted my examples. You can use as a template for your homework or for your take-home work if you want. Okay, so uh, this here under Chapter 10 on Blackboard, if you open up the Chapter 10 Excel part here. Okay, all the examples here I did in Excel, and so if you want to use any of these for templates or examples, you're welcome to them. I posted them there. And so there's demonstration problem 10.1, 10.3, 10.4, 10.6, and I think this one we're about to do. Okay, so again, when you do your homework or any of the take-home final stuff or assignments, you can do these game parts in Excel and just take a screen cap or copy and paste it. or you're welcome just to draw this stuff on graphing paper on a piece of paper, whatever is easier for you to get your homework done. And so you can use my Excel template as an example if you want to use it, or you're free to just to use a ruler on graphing paper and do it that way as well. Okay, so this one, we're going to look at a scenario where two firms play a game, but it's going to end, and there's some chance the game's going to end any period. So demonstration problem 10.7. So two cigarette manufacturers repeatedly play the following simultaneous move billboard advertising game. And I think can can firms still advertise for cigarettes on billboards? I'm not sure. I don't think they can, but let's assume that this is still. I think you can still advertise on like in magazines, but I'm not sure actually. There used to be a lot more cigarette advertising, and I'm not sure what has been banned and what hasn't. But let's assume that these cigarette manufacturers, because if you listen to that podcast, you saw that there was a loophole for like vaping, and vaping advertising wasn't banned yet. And so because cigarette advertising was banned and vaping advertisement was not banned, they were able to take some of the customers away from cigarette buyers because they were able to advertise and essentially steal some of the customers from cigarette manufacturers because they were hampered by not. I'm not not advocating for either, but I'm just saying like uh, if they when they looked at the analysis, one firm was able to steal customers away because they were not banned from advertising, and the other customer was banned from advertising. So if both cigarette and manufacturers advertise, each firm earns profits of 0 million. If neither advertises, each earns profits of 10. And if one advertises and the other doesn't, the firm that advertises earns 20, and the other firm loses 1 million. So if there's a 10% chance that the government will ban cigarette sales in any given year, can the firms collude by agreeing not to advertise? Okay, so here are the payouts. Okay, so if you were to get the Nash equilibrium, you'd see that if firm B advertises, firm A is going to advertise, and if firm B doesn't advertise, firm A is going to advertise, and it's uh, symmetric. So just Nash equilibrium. If they can't make an agreement, they're both going to agree not to advertise and just get the zeros. But you can see, especially if they play this game multiple times, if they can make an agreement. So what this says here is that advertising budgets cancel each other out, like it says in the problem, and they both get nothing for advertising, which is very likely. But if they both don't advertise, they save their advertising budget, and essentially the customers aren't. So what we're saying is that the customers aren't um, entering the market from advertising; they're just coming away from the other company. So it's a way to influence them to buy my cigarettes and not yours. But if they're going to smoke, they're going to smoke. So if they don't, if both of them don't advertise, then they're not fighting over customers, and they're just choosing between the two types without advertising. So if they both don't advertise, they both save 10 million, and that's what they get here. So if they could both make this agreement that let's both not advertise, and if we play this game multiple times, instead of getting 0 every time, we'll both get 10 million. Okay, but the problem is there's an incentive for some firm, or there might be an incentive for the firms to cheat and take the 20 now and just get the zeros for the rest of the time, but they get the 20 now. So we're going to compare, uh, given this, we're going to compare should the firms agree to price this or to choose to not advertise, get the higher payout if there's a 10% chance this game will end, or given that chance, should they just cheat now and take this? So let's find out. Okay. So what you want to do here is, given the probability, find out how many times they're going to likely play the game. Okay, so if there's a 10% chance that the game will end, then basically basically you can assume that they're going to play the game roughly 10 times. All right, that's what the math says. So if you take I guess the way to do it is just, let me go back to this. Okay, if I'll just give you a general formula, the way I got the 10 times. If you take the probability and you divide 1 by the probability the game will end, or let's call, I called this theta. Okay, so let's call they do this in the textbook, but the probability of the game ending, 10% is called theta. All right, so let's just take theta and call that the chance the game will end. Okay, and what you want to do here is just divide 1 by theta. Okay, so if you take 1 divided by theta, that's the likely number of times that these two firms will play the game. Okay, so for our example here, 1 is 1, and theta, the likelihood the game will end in any period was 10%. So in decimal terms, that's 0.10. All right, and if you divide 1 by 0.10, then that's like dividing a dollar by a nickel, which is 10. So if there's a 10% chance the game will end anytime, then the most likely number of times you can expect to play the game is 10, right? Okay, so when you're doing these type of problems, just find the probability the game will end, which will be given, and 1 divided by theta will tell you the number of times you're probably going to play the game, which you need for answering this question. So the most likely number of times we'll play the game, given the 10% chance it ends, is 10. All right. Okay. So if we think we're going to play the game 10 times, what's our expected payout if we break so here's the agreement, but what if we break the agreement? So breaking the agreement means we get this one time, or sorry, we get this one time by advertising and stealing the customers away from the other firm, and then because the agreement's broken, it goes back to advertising for everyone. So it's basically 20 plus a bunch of zeros. Okay? So one time you get the 20, and then the other 9 times for a total of 10, you get 0. Okay, so see, the total number of times we're going to play the game, expected to play the game is 10. 1 plus 9. The one time when you cheat, you get the 20. The other 9 times, you get 0. So if either firm is calculating their payoff for cheating, it's 20. All right, 20 plus a bunch of zeros. The present value of cheating is 20 million. Now, what is the present value if you keep the agreement and you both advertise? Okay, so remember, and so another way to do it from this perspective is just divide um, the payout that you're going to get every time by theta, or the chance the game ends, and 10 divided by 10%, 10 divided by 0.10 is 100 million. And that should give you the same result if you play the game expected 10 times this. So 10 times 10 is 100, or 10 divided by 0.1 is also 100. So if you think you're going to play the game about 10 times, it should make sense that if you get this 10 times, you get 100. Or if you get this once, you get 20, and then 9 zeros. So clearly, if this is what the math says, um, 10 tens of 100 is better than 120, and both firms do not have an incentive to cheat. And given these parameters, it's likely that they'll both price at 10 because they're expected to make 10 times, and that's 100 million. So since 20 is less than 10, firm A has no incentive to cheat, and firm B has no incentive to cheat, and the incentive for firm B is the same. And so each firms are probably going to collude. That's their best case by agreeing not to advertise. And if they can keep the agreement, they're both going to be better off. And instead of 10 zeros or 120 and 9 zeros, they can both get 10 tens, right? Okay, yeah. Questions on this one? Okay. Next type of game is you're gonna play the game multiple times, but you know exactly when the game's gonna end. So these are finitely repeated games, but there's a known final period. And this one is pretty easy to solve because it comes to the end of the period problem. And basically both firms are going to try to one up each other, and it's going to come down to just a Nash equilibrium, because if you know when the game's going to end, that poses a problem for both sides. Okay, so let's just this one you do it 2 times, which is basically a simplification, but it gets the point across. So example demonstration problem 10.8. You and your rival will play the game in table 10.11 2 times. Suppose your strategy is to charge a high price each period, provided your opponent never charge a low price at any period. How much will you earn? And let's assume the interest rate is 0. So there's no interest rate, and you're going to play this game twice. Okay, so if you look at, right, the Nash equilibrium is for both firms to price low, but if they can both agree to price high and play this game twice, they're going to get 20 plus 20. Now there's a big problem here because you only play the game twice, and you can see the best thing for each firm to do is to keep the agreement once and then cheat. All right, oops. So the problem is both firms know that, and here's what's going to happen. So given your strategy, your opponent's best strategy is to charge, so you're only playing the game twice, charge a high price the first period and a low price the second. So the best way is get the 10 plus the 50. Okay, to see why, note that if you charge a high price each period, you'd earn 10 the first period and 10 the second if you keep the agreement, for a total of 20. But if you charge a high price the first period and a low price the second period, you get 10 plus 50 for a total of 60. So you'd earn 10 units the first period, but lose 40 the second for a total loss of 30. Now, the problem is, since each of you knows this exactly when the game will end, the trigger strategy will not enhance your profits because each firm is going to do the same thing. So if each firm thinks they're going to charge high and then low, right, what's going to happen is they're both going to cheat and charge low the first time, and then that's going to put them both here. So even though you can see that both firms are better off if they both price 10 and get 10 plus 10 for 20, the incentive to cheat of getting 50 is too high, and they're both going to see that. They're both going to cheat, and knowing when the game ends, we're going back here, and given the end of period problem where you know when the game's going to end, the outcome is going to be low, low, and 0, 0, because both firms will try to undercut, and if both firms try to undercut, they cancel out and just go back to 0, 0. Okay, so we looked at 3 types of playing the game multiple times. So number one, you play the game over and over forever and do the present value. The second type, there's a chance the game ends, so figure out your expected number of times to play it and compare keeping the agreement with not with cheating. And if you know when the game's going to end, you're just going to be left the analysis tells you that the outcome is going to be just the original Nash equilibrium, because if you know when the game ends, you're just going to try to undercut your opponent. But if both of them undercut, then it goes back to here. Okay, so now we're going to look at some games. When you play the game, there's they're called multi-stage games or sequential games, and basically, like one person or one firm or one player or one company is going to go first, and the other firm is going to go second. Okay, so there's something with this type of game called a subgame perfect equilibrium, or a subgame perfect Nash equilibrium, and so this is a condition describing a set of strategies that constitutes a Nash equilibrium, and allows no player to improve his own payoff at any stage of the game by changing strategy. So it's kind of a description of what each player will do given what the other player would do first or second. Okay, so it's a way to describe the Nash equilibrium for a sequential game. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that with this example. Okay, so two nice examples of multi-stage or sequential games, and then examples of how we can describe the outcome or the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium. Okay, so again, I did this in Excel. Okay, so you're welcome to use this as an example, or again, you're just welcome. You can just draw it, your game tree, your game depiction on a piece of graphing paper or whatever is best to get your homework done. But you can use my example here if you want. Okay, so here we go. Demonstration problem 10.9. Your firm must decide whether or not to introduce a new product. If you introduce the new product, your rival will have to decide whether or not to clone the new product. If you don't introduce it, you and your rival each earn $1 million each. If you introduce it and your rival clones it, you'll lose $5 million and your rival will earn 20. So you spend a lot on research and development and you're going to lose it. And basically your rival just steals the recipe. If you introduce the new product and your rival does not clone it, you make 100 million and your rival makes 0. So set up the extensive form of the game, which is like draw the game tree. And should you introduce the new product or not? Okay, so see how I did, basically you're A, so A goes first, and your rival is B, and B goes second. Okay, so if you draw the game how it was described in the word problem, you can introduce or not introduce. Okay, and it says if you don't introduce the new product, or sorry, if you don't introduce the new product, you and your rival both earn 1 million each, and the game's up. So here's the first option: you don't introduce it, you both get 1 million. Okay. Now, if you introduce it, your rival has a choice. So if you introduce it, then the second choice goes to your rival player B in the purple, and player B, the rival, can either clone it or don't clone it. And the problem says if you introduce it and they clone it, you lose 5 million and your rival gets 20 million. So here's the outcome with you going first and your rival going second. Okay, or if your rival doesn't clone it, you make 100 and your rival makes 0. Okay, so see how based on how the game is described, you introduce it, the game's over, these are the payouts. Or if you introduce it, your rival has a choice to make. So the way to figure out or solve these games or describe the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium or the outcome is to go to the end of the game and decide what the second player or the responder would do, and then you go backwards. So let's first go to the reactor, or like the what the second mover would do, which is player B, your rival. So if player B gets to this, if you don't introduce it, there's no choice. So player B's reaction, the only choice that player B or your rival can make is if it gets to this point, all right, they can either clone it or don't clone it. So if they're given the choice, they can clone and get 20, or they can don't clone and get 0. So it's obvious to see that if the rival is given the choice, their best choice is to clone it and get the 20. They would never choose to not clone it because not cloning it gives them 0 and cloning it gives them 20. So we know that given the choice, this is what your rival or the second mover would do. So that's going to factor into what you should do with the product. So if you don't introduce it, you get 1. All right, 1 million. If you introduce it, you know that your rival's going to clone it and you're going to get -5. So even though you want to get the 100 for not cloning it, your rival's not going to give you that choice. So you know if you get to this point, firm B or the rival's going to choose to clone, and you're basically comparing introduce, -5, or don't introduce, 1. So given the choices of the second mover, your rival, it's best for you to not introduce it because the 1 million is bigger than the -5. So basically the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium describes the best responses of all the players here. So the first mover, you, don't introduce. The second mover is going to clone, even though they're not given the choice. You want to put in their choices. And the outcome is 1 million and 1 million, even though the second mover, the rival, never gets to choose. So these are the best choices, and these are the outcomes. So basically, you should not introduce the new product because 1 of not introducing is bigger than -5. Of introducing, your rival clones it, and you lose 5. Okay, so yeah, we see that. All right, so one more example from the PowerPoint here. So 1010, or demonstration problem 1010, another multi-stage or sequential game. Okay, so this is demonstration problem 1010. So let's consider the bargaining game just described, but suppose the order of play is reversed. The union gets to make an offer, and then management decides whether or not to accept or reject it. And what's the subgame perfect equilibrium outcome of this bargaining process? So this is written how it was first management goes first, and then union gets to respond, but now it's the other way around. So it doesn't matter what happened first. This is how you're basically you're basically describing outcomes in which management and the union split $100. So it says to simplify it. I mean, you can offer anything from 1 to 100, but just to simplify it, let's do $1, 50, and 99. So if you offer 1, that means management gets $1 and you get the other 99. If you offer 50, that means you both split it. And if you offer 99, you get $1 and they get 99. So these are all the offers. And the first number goes to the first mover, which is you, the union, and the second mover is management. So whatever you offer, management has one choice: accept or reject it. Okay, if you offer if you offer $1, management can either accept it and get $1 or reject it and get 0. So they're going to accept because 1 is bigger than 0. If you offer 50, they can accept it and get 50, or reject it and get 0. They're going to accept it and get 50. If you offer 99, obviously they're going to accept it and get 99, and they're going to if they reject it, they get 0. So the point to see is no matter what you offer, um, rationally they should accept it because whatever they accept is better than rejecting it, and rejecting it means you both get 0. So given that, anything will be accepted by the second mover because anything is better than zero for the receiver. You're going to offer as a union the lowest amount because you get 90. See, look at all the outcomes. So you either if you offer 1, you get 99. If you offer 50, you get 50. If you offer 1, you get 1. So the best thing for you to do is offer the lowest amount possible and get the 99 because they have an incentive to accept anything because anything is better than zero and they have to react, not choose first. Now that's what the game theory aspect would say. It would say that you offer $1, they accept it, and the outcome is you get 99, they get 1. But this type of game, a lot of research has showed that even though this is the rational thing to do, like things like equity play into account, and a lot of times, even though it seems rational for you to take $1 over nothing, if you know they're getting a 99 and you're only getting $1, you might reject it because who cares if you lose $1 if they lose 99? So the technically the game theory says that this should be the outcome, but in practice, this type of game often doesn't come out like this. It's only when it gets to like the more equitable offers that something like this would be accepted. So maybe you get like 49.51 or 51.49 or something like that, or 40.60. But most likely, if you tried this in practice, this would not come out. This would not be accepted. Okay, so all of those game payoff matrices and game trees or um, game depictions are here in this Excel file, so you can look at any of these if you want to use those as examples or templates. So those are there. All right, so that's this file here, Chapter 10 Excel file. Okay, so there's one big problem on the homework that's due next week for Chapter 10, which is this one, Homework Chapter 10. And so again, don't worry about the oligopoly homework. We're going to cover that next week, so don't get to that yet. And again, if you didn't listen to the podcast or they're here or on Spotify or whatever, I think again they're pretty relevant that we talked about there. So hopefully you listen to those, but if not, take a look at those there. And okay, homework problem, homework chapter 10. Okay, so you got one big problem, and basically you're gonna do a one-time game. You're going to do a game with an uncertain final period, and then you're gonna do a game where there's a where you draw the game tree, and one player goes first, one player goes second. Okay, so let me read it for you, and then it should be all the you can do what we did as examples to kind of set it up here, but it should be familiar with what we just went through. Okay, so assume Toyota and Hyundai play the following simultaneous move game. So Toyota has two pricing options for its 2020 Prius, and Hyundai has two pricing options for its 2020 Ioniq. Both can either price at 20,000 or 25,000. So if both price at 20,000, then each will earn profits of 3 million, and if both price at 25,000, each earn profits of 4 million. So you can see that if they both agree to up the price, they both get extra revenue because the customer has no choice. But if one of the companies undercuts the other, if one price is at 20 and the other price is at 25, then the one that prices lower at 20 earns 5, and the company that prices at 25 higher doesn't get as many customers, they only get 1 million. So you can draw this and put Toyota on the left side with Toyota's profits listed first and Hyundai is listed second. And part one is there's a one-time game. So assume part A they play the game only once. First draw the playoff matrix and then define, so illustrate it on the payoff matrix and just describe the Nash equilibrium with the strategies and the payouts. Okay. And B, they're going to play the game multiple times. So now assume they play it repeatedly and there's an uncertain final period. And there's a 25% chance that Donald Trump will ban hybrid vehicles in any given period. So theta is 25%, or in decimal terms, that's 0.25. So both agree to price their new hybrid vehicles at 25, provided neither company cheats on the agreement. So, okay, given the fact that the theta is 25, all right, calculate how many times they're going to play the game, or likely, and find out what's Toyota's profits if it cheats. Okay, gets the payouts from cheating once, and then the goes back to the Nash equilibrium for the rest of the times, or what's the expected payouts if it cooperates for the whole time they expect to play this game, and what will Toyota do? All right, and then part C, there's going to be a sequential or multi-stage game. So assume Tesla and Toyota face a multi-stage game where Tesla's the leader and Toyota is the follower. So Tesla goes first and has to decide whether or not to introduce the Model 8, which is a low-budget all-electric car starting at 20,000. And Tesla has one decision: either introduce the Model 8 or don't introduce the Model 8. If Tesla doesn't introduce the Model 8, the game ends immediately, and Tesla earns 2 million and Toyota earns 8 million. So put Tesla first payouts and Toyota second because it goes second. If Tesla introduces the Model 8, Toyota has three choices. So Toyota can do nothing, and Tesla's going to earn 6 million and Toyota earns 4. Or Toyota can sue Tesla, where Tesla earns 3 million and Toyota also earns 3 million. Or the third option for Toyota, if Tesla introduces, is to introduce the Prius Squared, which is a low budget all electric Prius starting at 20,000. Okay, so the result being that Tesla earns 5 and Toyota also earns 5 million. So here, draw the game tree where Tesla is going to go first, and they're going to have these choices. And Toyota is going to go second, and if Tesla introduces, then Toyota has three choices, and Toyota goes second. Okay, so Tesla goes first, Toyota goes second if Tesla introduces. So draw the game tree, and then just solve the game, and define the subgame perfect Nash equilibrium, which is just basically the outcome of the game. So define the outcome of the strategies, and then the payouts given both players choosing their best response. And so basically go to the end of the game first, figure out what Toyota would do given the choice, and then go backwards and find out what Tesla would do given that it knows what Toyota would do. Okay, so you can look at the examples we just did as examples of all these. And yeah. Okay, so questions on what I want you to do for this assignment? Okay. All right, so remember the chapter 9 homework is due today, so make sure the rest of you get your chapter 9 homework posted here. And the homework I just described that we went through is due next Monday right here. So that one goes there, and then we'll get to this one next week. So we got a few more. Let me just highlight what we're doing the next couple weeks. Okay, so again, let's see. This is due today. The one we just talked about is due next week. And then next week we're gonna talk about we're gonna spend most of the time talking about the second big homework. So we had the chapter homeworks. You had this one, which you did a few weeks ago or before the 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 holiday. All right, then we have one more big homework, some more data analysis that we're going to talk about next week, which is the oligopoly homework, and so we'll cover that next week, and that'll be due the following week. Okay, so you don't need if you're reading the chapter, you don't there's no reading for next week, but we will cover the oligopoly homework, and do listen to those podcasts if you haven't done so already. But yeah, so chapter 9 homework due today, chapter 10 homework due next week, and we'll talk about this one and do some data analysis. So if you're coming or when you come next week, make sure you're able to get on Excel because we're going to do some data analysis for this oligopoly homework. And yeah, I think you'll like some of the stuff we do here. So it's I think that's what I have for today. And assuming there's no questions, I think that's what we got. So everyone, thank you for joining and participating, and have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you next Monday, same time. And thanks again.